let's start Unit 2 with a couple more new terms. So the first ones describe groups of individuals. A population is all the individuals that we care about. It could be people, like the population of the United States, or it could be other objects or cases. The sample is a subset of the population. So these are the individuals that we actually collect data from. The next two terms are numerical summaries. So a parameter is a number that describes the population, and conveniently, parameter also starts with P. So this is the number that we really want to know. This would be like a population mean or a population proportion. A statistic is a number that describes the sample. Again, conveniently, they both start with S. So this would be a number that we use to estimate the parameter, right? We actually have sample data, so we can calculate that statistic and then use it to estimate the parameter. So to put this into practice, let's talk about unemployment. So the unemployment was 10.2% as of July 2020. And when we look at that 10.2%, what population are we talking about? So we're actually not talking about all Americans in this population because we're not counting people who are retired, children, anybody who's not looking for work. So the population in this case is actually just the labor force. And they're pretty strict about this. If you weren't actively looking for work in the last 4 weeks, you're not part of the labor force. So you're not officially employed or unemployed. The parameter, that's a number that describes the population. So in this case, we would be looking at the true percentage of unemployed people in the population. Right, the parameter is always going to be a number that describes the population. And I guess I'll be more specific here since the population is the labor force, the true percentage of unemployed people in the labor force. So what about the sample? Where do they actually get this data from? It turns out that there's this really big survey called the Current Population Survey. It actually has about 60,000 households in it. So they carefully select these households to try to find a sample that's representative. But these 60,000 households that take part in, I'm just going to put CPS, that's the Current Population Survey. And then the statistic, that's the number that we actually calculate from the sample. So that would be that 10.2%. So notice that the statistic is a number that we're using to estimate the parameter, right? 10.2% is an estimate of the true percentage of unemployed people. In this case, it's a really good estimate because it's based on such a large representative sample. So why is unemployment information based on a sample? Why not ask everyone, which would be called taking a census of the population? I think it's probably pretty easy to see why we don't do that. If we had to track down every person every month to record unemployment, that would be an extremely expensive process, also just a very, very time-consuming process. And if we're being honest, it's just a practically impossible thing to do. The logistics of talking to every American or every American in the labor force every month is practically impossible. So we do carry out a census every 10 years, and even that's pretty crazy if you think about it. I just Googled how much will the 2020 census cost, and it's estimated to cost approximately $15.6 billion. So it's extremely expensive. So why do we do it if it's so time-consuming and expensive? It's actually surprisingly in the Constitution, saying that the census has to be conducted as a head count. The U.S. Constitution is much older than the concept of random sampling, and it's extremely difficult to get anything changed in the Constitution. I would recommend the 6th episode of The West Wing. It's called Mr. Willis of Ohio. It's all about problems with the census. Such a good show. Anyway, yes, I highly recommend it. Okay, so that's 4 basic terms to get us started in this unit: population, sample, parameter, statistic, and census.